Hello, everybody, and welcome to Provider AWS meeting. It's Friday, September 18th, 2020. Please follow our community guidelines for being investor behavior. The meeting is being recorded. So let's take a look at the agenda. We have 3 items on the agenda today. The first I will take so it is I merged a small PR just to get 119 support in the external cloud provider. Andrew, did you I saw that you merged it. Did you actually build the image for it, or do we still need to do that?
Yeah, I think we still need to cut the tag and do the image push.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I will follow up. I think I need like the credentials for that to actually.
Yeah, I think you, myself, and Justin's I don't maybe your work email or personal email, I don't remember, but it should be registered in the CNCF GRC account. So it should work, but yeah, I'll walk you through it because it is manual, but we should really get some PROW integration so that we push automatically on a tag, and so we don't have to do it manually every time.
Okay, that's a really good point. Need automated PROW integration for push on tag. Okay. So that's all I wanted to say for that one. Andrew, would you be willing to talk about the next one, 120 being the last release for entry features?
Yeah. So as many of you know, we've been trying to remove the entry cloud providers in Kubernetes, which is making decent progress, but it is still going slow, and it's a long-standing effort because we want to make sure that we don't break any users doing the migration, right? So like even for the AWS provider, I think we're pretty behind in that the external provider is not it's not really on par with out of tree or entry, and it's not really tested significantly enough. And we want to see significant adoption of it before we can just go ahead and remove the entry provider. And so we've been noticing that the entry provider has been also seeing some features go in, and not that anyone's purposefully trying to do that, but I think just things happen, right? Like people need a functionality, they open a PR and someone approves it, and by adding more functionality we make it harder and harder for us to cut that tie. So Sig Cloud Provider wants to put some guardrails in place so that any PR labeled kind feature is not allowed for the entry provider starting 1.21. And we're going to have some PROW automation to do that automatically. And basically, if you need to merge a feature that is marked as, if you need to merge a PR that is marked as feature, it requires sign off from the SIG, and there needs to be a really compelling reason why you're doing that. And so we're hoping that this is going to help us move that needle for adopting external providers as we add more and more features in the external provider that may not be available in tree. So that's just a bit. Folks have questions, concerns?
So one thing that I think we should do at the point where we switch from 120 to 121 and add the guardrails to PROW is we should either, depending on what we decide to do with V2, we should either at that point say, okay, V2 should be at least in a point where we can start accepting features there. Or alternatively, we could move the legacy code base over. Instead of importing legacy, we could copy the code over like we have done in the past, but it was I think it was premature at that point, and then accept features there. But we need to have somewhere where we're allowing new development, obviously in the external cloud provider. So, V2 would be, I think, a reasonable place to do that if it ends up being what we adopt.
Yeah, I agree. Ideally, it'll be, like we still import legacy V1 because we still want to get bug fixes. But then all features goes into V2, and hopefully by 1.21, like V2 is at a usable state at least, so that users can start playing around with it and try to get features in. So that sounds good.
Yeah, cool. Anything else on that topic?
Do we know of any features that we were trying to get into that would take more than 1.20? Or even like, do we know what features that we know in flight trying to get into 1.20 right now?
So the only big thing that I know of, going on at AWS at least, is we have some folks that are trying to essentially, so we talked about this last meeting, but they're building what's called the AWS load balancer controller, and they want NLB and ALB support to be in that controller, and then the cloud provider using some, I think Google is doing a very similar thing. So they're using the same feature that Google is adding to kind of basically just have it not implemented in the cloud provider and fall back on that. So I think that's going to require some changes. I'm not sure if they're merged yet or not. I really haven't been following that very closely, but it should require some changes in the cloud provider. And I think that they're trying to get it merged for 120.
Okay. Yeah, I know that's a common ask from cloud providers. I actually opened the cap. I can't link it now because I'm on my phone, but I actually opened the cap to make that generic in the service controller by adding a class annotation field to service. That way, like, we're not, like, every provider isn't implementing their own like annotation to skip a load balancer. It'd be great if we can all consolidate on that implementation rather than doing that.
Yeah, I will try to find that cap after this meeting, because you're too quick, Peter. I'll put that in the agenda.
Any ideas if the classic load balancer will still be supported by whatever the plan is there in the controller?
Yeah, so as far as I know, classic load balancer support will remain in the cloud provider, the cloud provider we have now, and would also be supported by the external cloud provider. Only NLB and ALB support is going to be in this. Basically what they're doing is they're taking the NLB code from the entry cloud provider and merging it with the ALB ingress controller. And then they're just leaving the classic load balancer stuff there.
No, okay. There are some, let's say, artificial limitations on both the ALB and NLB, and are really annoying if you want to, let's say, have a 1AZ thing, you cannot use ALB, or so best to keep
yeah,
also.
I mean, if you have specific callouts there, I would talk to, are you familiar with Moonfish? She's driving that effort.
Not really, so, but I think I can find him somehow.
So go ahead.
We see in COPs many people coming to us say, we want NLB. and we kind of start explaining what the downsides are, and end up, going away from NLB or ALB. Why can't we use ALB for our cluster? Because if we put ALB, you would have to have at least 2 availability zones. So until then, classic load balancer still is the most flexible in these areas, which has its downsides also, but yeah.
Is that a common complaint with the 2 AZ requirement?
Yes, I mean, most people want development clusters or test clusters foremost. So once you start toying with it, you get into why doesn't it work with my single AZ? Why do I have to put 2 of them there? So, and you get to other costs also. If you get 2 AZs, you have to have, in our case, 2 NAT gateways and so on. So anyway, it's a complicated, from my point of view, it's uselessly complicating the requirement. I don't see any real reason to make that limitation to 2 AZs minimum. I mean, if people don't want HA, it's pretty much their business. But anyway, probably this is something to discuss with the AWS guys at some point.
Yeah, I can relay your message or give you the contact information of the person who's driving that project if you're interested. Just you can.
That would be cool. Thank you.
Yeah, cool. All right, if there's nothing else on that topic, Andrew, did you want to add anything there?
Yeah, I was basically just going to say around the class annotation, basically the proposed behavior is that if you don't set the class annotation, it is just the current behavior by the cloud provider. And then you can basically, like, if you add the class annotation, it just gets ignored by the provider and an external thing can take over, which I think is basically what both Google and AWS are doing today. So yeah, we should try to rally around that, like try to get that same implementation if possible. Maybe it's too late, but yeah.
Yeah, I can float it at least by the team that's working on it.
Awesome, thanks.
Cool. Okay, so, and then also the V2 cloud provider, I think you'd be the best person to talk about that as well.
Yeah, so I have started a branch and started working on it. And I have an engineer on my team at VMware that is also going to help. And she has started the load balancer implementation of it. And I'm going to start with the instances implementation of the V2 interface. So basically what I think I'm going to do with the instances is I'm going to basically port over the existing implementation. And I'm going to start by just changing like one breaking change, which is to allow a node name that's not the private DNS name. And like kind of incrementally change and improve using like the current implementation as kind of a baseline. If there are other known things that people want to address, like I know for the load balancer implementation, we're definitely going to implement a better naming scheme for the ELB or the ALB that's not like some random UID. But if there are things like that in the provider that you've always wanted to see changed, but we couldn't because, for reasons, we'd love to hear them so we can get them.
I think the annotations around load balancers are really haphazard. And I think if we design those from the ground up, I think we could do a much better job.
Yeah, do we by that, do you mean like let's redesign the annotations, or do you mean like let's create CRDs or something that can define those better?
Yeah, I mean, annotations are not my favorite way of configuring things, but I'm not, I'm not taking a stance there. I just think we could, if knowing what we know now and knowing all the annotations that we've used, if we start from zero and redesign it, I doubt it would look the same. So, maybe we do like a small AWS kep, for the annotations there, or we could just do like a little design doc or something like that. But somebody should just kind of noodle over it a little bit and see what they can come up with.
I think a common problem with annotations is that the values are often organized such that they're kind of aimed towards like a single port or a single set of targets. And so if you have a service or an ingress that's listening on multiple ports, being able to define settings that are different for each of those ports is often not possible. The annotations just aren't flexible enough to support that. So that might be one thing to consider if you're redesigning how the annotations work.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That's a good point. Cool. So are there, I know you opened an issue regarding V2. Is there places for people to jump in and help at this point? I know, we have a lot of implementation work to do. Is the issue pretty, I haven't actually looked at it yet.
Yeah, so I basically broke down the issue into 4 like implementable parts, instances, the load balancer, zones, and routes. And so I'm working on instances. My coworker is working on the load balancer one. If folks have bandwidth to take like routes or zones, that'd be great. Otherwise, like we can wait for the initial implementations and then folks can help review the PR and even test it.
Cool. All right. Peter.
Yeah, Nick, you opened a PR a while back about adding the external cloud controller manager to COPS. And while we're talking about, improving testing and stuff before going GA, I think it might be helpful to revisit this. Once we land it, we can get some periodic end-to-end coverage on it, and that should, help improve our confidence for going to GA.
Exactly. Yeah, that was the goal with this. I got back to it this week a little bit. So I think I have a couple changes that I haven't pushed to the PR yet, but I ran E2E tests on the cluster that it created with this. Got some failures that I needed to investigate. So I haven't dove into those failures yet, but I'm hoping, I was hoping to get this done this week, but definitely next week. So I think one thing that I noticed, there was a comment on behavior for pre-118 where we don't have the external cloud provider doesn't have 118 releases. So what is the correct behavior there? What do we want to do? Do we want to if they choose external, do we say it's not supported pre-118?
I mean, if there's not a stable external provider, then yeah, I think.
Yeah. What was it using before? There was like there was some like external cloud provider support, and I think it was just an image with all of the providers.
Yeah. So yeah, at some point in the Kubernetes release, we shipped the Cloud Controller Manager that came built in with the existing entry, but in the Cloud Controller Manager component, and we removed it because like really like each provider should build their own and ship it.
Yeah, so that's, I'm guessing that's not worth like falling back on for pre 118 versions. We should just say not supported.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Anything else that anybody wants to talk about?
I added a link to the chat to one AWS SDK upgrade in the Kubernetes repo. I wanted to know if is there some value to it, or, you know, these things pretty much are useless now.
So that was specifically added because it's adding support for the Milan region.
Yes,
maybe,
there were some other improvements there, like Route 53 for China in newer versions. They added some endpoints, I think. So this guy started it, never finished it. It's a pretty simple thing. I think he got stuck at the COPS tests, which we kind of helped them finish. But then I think he didn't know how to rebase. So, so if there's some value to it, I think we can make a PR with the upgrade or something.
was there never a PR made that superseded this one? Let me just double check.
Let's see.
Yeah, you're right. It's still 128.2 in head. So yeah, let's make sure this gets rebased.
I think I will create a new one, and is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's hard to rebase this one. Plus, there are new versions of the SDK, so okay. Thank you.
Yeah, cool. All right. Nothing else, then I will stop the recording.